Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Have you ever wondered what your life would look like if you had lost your mobility all of a sudden? Think about the impact it would have on your daily routine. You would have to be dependent on someone else's generosity for the rest of your life. Scary, right? And if there's one thing that separates the human race from other species, it is our ability to operate on free will. To further illustrate the relationship between freedom and mobility, I'm going to be taking you back to a time when life had forced me into an unconventional sabbatical. 5 years ago, in August 2015, little did I know that a harmless game of football would not only impact the scoreboard, but would also impact my lifestyle thereafter. All of this started off with a very small injury, and in spite of timely medical intervention, the wound failed to heal. Though the doctors and staff were extremely hopeful about my recovery, their intentions unfortunately did not translate into my physical well being. As the wound became increasingly critical, my mobility was equally challenged. School, extracurriculars, and university prep, all of this had to be put on hold because I could not perform the most basic of activities, and that was to walk. For each step taken, I had to pause for a few minutes to summon all the energy in the world to take the next. In spite of trying to best the odds for the first few days, I had to eventually give in. From then until the next 2 months, I was mostly in bed rest. This was a time when the mind came to hypothesize the most craziest of scenarios that would put any individual under a lot of distress. To break away from this vicious cycle of negative reinforcement, I was yearning for some semblance of social interaction, one that extended beyond my family. My friends at school and the friendships that I had formed outside were my natural choices. In spite of me trying to reach out to them on a continued basis, I had received no response. Initially, I would assume that they were busy with work and were doing something that demanded a lot of time and attention. But later, I came to find out that I was being ignored. And this brings me to lesson number one, that not all relationships have to be mutual. And I'll be speaking about this very shortly. Given that I lacked a social avenue to share my thoughts, it further affected my mental state. Till today, I do not know what got me through that phase. Because at the time, I was convinced that I was a step closer to imploding. But if I were to critically reflect, the praise of my family, my unintended show of resilience, and destiny put together was the reason why I got a second lease on life. Sometimes you get a reminder to be grateful for the things that you have. And this was one of life's ways of telling me, you're welcome. Being worn out at the face of adversity and yet having the ability to stand up is something that continues to define me. And I'm so glad to have gone through this experience during my formative years because the life lessons gleaned have been invaluable. Some of which I will be speaking to have even provided me with a foundation that could withstand any kind of turbulence. A more relevant example would be the pandemic. So, lesson number one, as I previously mentioned, is that not all relationships have to be mutual. During this time, I was able to differentiate the acquaintances from the friends. This lesson, in my opinion, was a complete life changer as it dictated the quality of friendships that I would press for in the future. When you're successful, people naturally gravitate towards you because they want a slice of your success by feeling their true intentions. Little did I know that my innocence would be challenged in the most extraordinary of circumstances. And therefore, I told myself that this facet of my life needed a different approach. Not everything has to be taken at its face value. Sometimes you need to weigh up the true intentions of a person against the facade that is projected to the world. Lesson number 2: be receptive to opportunity. In my previous life, I was always indecisive when it came to taking up new opportunities because I was wary of taking a leap of faith. The reason behind my reluctance was due to the preconceived notions that I had about my strengths and limitations. In my view, my limitations outweighed my strengths. And because of that, I always used to think that I was undeserving of the opportunities that came my way and thought someone else could have been doing a better job. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my first encounter with imposter syndrome. Interestingly, this wasn't the case when I was unwell because I would be manifesting over a reality where I would be the master of my destiny. As in the words of Brian Tracy, the potential of the average person is like a huge ocean unsailed, a new continent waiting to be explored, and a world of possibilities that is waiting to be channeled towards the greater good. In fact, tonight's TEDx talk is something that Abhishek from 2015 would not have pursued because he would be imprisoned by his own fears. Post recovery, I made it a priority to lap up any opportunity that came my way, regardless of how big or small it might be. With a slight change in mentality, I was able to embark on this incredible journey of personal growth, which has allowed me to develop a heightened sense of self-awareness and empathy. Which brings me to lesson number 3, and I promise this is the last one, which is the lesson of embracing your failures. Failures can be extremely daunting, and everyone does it at some point, or must have gone through it. And to be truly receptive of the opportunities in store for you and of the future, you must make peace with your past, no matter how bitter it might have been. I have always worn my failures as a badge of honor because I believe that it is these learnings that continue to define a person. Take the example of Colonel Sanders, who, in the truest sense, was the epitome of the notion that a failure is like a bruise and not a tattoo. The man did not taste success until his late 60s, and if he hadn't made peace with his past, today we won't be having a KFC. Not just Colonel Sanders, take the example of any successful individual, and he or she would have had that dark chapter that in hindsight would have been the biggest blessing. At times, success can be a very lousy teacher, whereas failure can be a powerful tool for transformation. Therefore, you and I need to shake the stigma that is associated with failure, because we cannot afford to have another generation that is not accepting or tolerant of their own mistakes. In an era where instant gratification is the order of the day, we must educate people around us to endure the short-term pains for the long-term gains. As I share these lessons with you all, I am equally grateful and thrilled because I have a wealth of wisdom at my disposal. Reinforcing these learnings into my life time and time again, I have improved my overall well being and resilience. Though life experiences can be good to have, I would strongly recommend you to learn from the experiences of others because no one is here for the long haul. And if someone like me can turn his life around with these three simple yet poignant learnings, then I believe your time to shine is just around the corner. But before that can happen, ask yourself. Ask yourself whether you're willing to turn your life around. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.